Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, The Aftermath of Critical Calls, How to Move Forward. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've got a full house, so we're just going to wait one more minute and let the last few people trickle in. While we're waiting, feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourselves by agency and where you're joining us from. All right. I'm going to start this. Welcome again to the PowerPhone webinar, The Aftermath of Critical Calls, How to Move Forward. I'm Danielle Morphy. I'm the marketing manager for PowerPhone. Before we begin the presentation, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be made available after the presentation. To ensure the best possible audio experience, your mics have been muted, so if you have any questions, use the questions tab on your webinar control panel. This tab is on the lower right control panel and it's next to the chat panel. It's to the left of the chat. Ask any questions anytime and we'll do our best to answer them at the conclusion of the presentation. So now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to your hosts. Today, Joe LaFave is an implementation manager here at PowerPhone with over 26 years in public safety. He's a retired firefighter paramedic. He was a PD telecommunicator and supervisor for 15 years in Uxbridge, Mass. And he's been a PowerPhone instructor for 10 years and implementation manager here since 2019. We also are being joined by Chief Mark Montminy. He's the Chief of Police for the Uxbridge Police Department in Massachusetts with 35 years in law enforcement, a graduate of Northwestern University, a graduate of the FBI National Academy. He was the incident commander during a mass shooting in 2010. He's provided the after-action review of the Newtown Police during the Sandy Hook school shooting, and he has lectured around the country on active shooter response and mental health aftermath. Also joining us today is Robin Turner. She's a retired emergency call taker who has served in several Connecticut towns. She started her career as a police fire 911 call taker in 1984. She served in Manchester, Connecticut as a call taker from 86 to 2015. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
Thank you, Danielle, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today's training or webinar is going to be specifically talking about how to deal with critical incidents and what to do next. How do we move on from that? But just a little bit of background on PowerPhone. Our mission statement, as it states there, is call handling is not just about dispatching. It's a foundation for effective responses. At PowerPhone, we want to empower 911 telecommunicators and professionals with the tools they need to get through situations and calls like this. We've been in the public safety realm for well over 40 years, and to date, we've trained over 500,000 dispatchers. We have our TR or TRSA systems deployed in over 700 agencies worldwide, and currently we hold 4 U.S. patents. So with that, I am going to now talk about a little bit of outline of today's conversations. It's really about that critical incident stress. As dispatchers, we are immediately under stress as soon as we enter that communication center. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Just being trapped in a room puts a stress on us. Knowing that we're responsible not only for the caller's safety, we're also responsible for all of our police officers, our firefighters, and our paramedics. While we're dealing with a critical or a hot call, the other calls don't stop. They still keep coming in, and we have to be able to deal with them, especially for those of us that worked in small centers. And when I worked for the better part of my career, I worked alone, just one dispatcher on duty. And one of the hardest things we deal with as dispatchers when our officers are in harm's way is waiting through that silence. We know that we have to give them the airwaves to communicate, but it can be really, it adds a tremendous amount of stress to us as dispatchers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Montminy and give an overview of the personal experience he had with the Hartford Distributor shooting. Chief?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I happen to be the Chief of Police in Manchester, Connecticut in August of 2010. And Manchester has a very large Budweiser beer distributorship. You can see the photos of the exterior of the building. Basically, it's a distributorship where tractor trailer trucks bring product in on one side of the building, and then on the other side of the building, delivery trucks exit, and they service the Hartford, Connecticut region. For those of you who aren't familiar with where Manchester is, we're right outside of the capital city of Hartford. Some shots of the interior of the building. What basically happened here is we had an employee who was stealing product. He had been fired when he arrived at work for his shift. His shift started at 7 o'clock in the morning. He sat down at a meeting with senior staff at the facility. They told him he was going to be fired. He reached into his lunch pail, produced a pistol, and immediately shot 3 people, and then walked into the factory floor and continued to shoot more people. Eventually, he shot 10 people, killing 8. And this all happened at 7:30 in the morning. So at 7:15, I should say. So at 7:15, our shift started at 7 o'clock, which means the dispatchers would have just arrived to work. And the primary dispatch was Robin Turner. And Robin Turner happened to be the unlucky call taker who was on the call. But Robin had over 20 years of being a dispatcher. So this isn't her first rodeo. She's been through a lot of other calls, not perhaps as intense as this, but my guess is that this is probably the worst nightmare for a dispatcher. Is that right, Robin?
That is correct.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is play the call, the initial call. So just to put you in place at 7:15 in the morning, Robin's just gotten her first cup of coffee and sat down at the desk. And
911. I need the cops here at Hartford Distributors right away shooting.
What's going on? Who got
Somebody
shot?
got shot. I got shot.
Okay, I need some information, sir. Who
Somebody,
got shot?
we need the cops. What? Shooting people. I just got shot.
Okay, I need to know what his name is.
His name is. He's a black guy. Get the cops here right away, please.
Sir, stay on the line with me. My
Bleeding
partner.
all over the place.
Okay. How many people got shot?
I don't know.
Okay, you don't know. And you're shot where?
In my head.
You're shot in the head?
Yeah.
And what's your name?
My name is.
Okay.
I
What's
think
that
I'm
medical?
shot.
Who's the person shooting people again?
His name is. He's a black guy. He's wearing shorts.
Okay, black male shorts. Anything else? What kind of gun?
I don't know. I didn't see it.
You didn't see it. And where are you in the building, sir?
I'm hiding in an office.
Hiding where?
In an office. People are running all over the place.
Okay, I understand that, but if you keep talking to me, we can help you more, okay?
All right. Yeah.
Okay. And you don't know if it was an automatic weapon or not?
He shot pretty fast.
Okay, and you're still. Were you bleeding a lot?
Yeah, there's people running all over the place.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I just see him running out. He's running away right now. He's shooting
running
at
away?
somebody else. Yeah, he's still shooting.
He's outside.
He's shooting at a girl.
Okay. How many people are down, sir?
Just put him up and say we're on the way. He's still running after people. He's not leaving.
Okay, do you see what kind of gun he has, sir?
It's a black gun. I don't know.
Is it
He's carrying a red. He's wearing a blue shirt and blue shorts. He's got a. Oh shit! He's still shooting. I hear guns out there.
All right. Did he used to work there?
Yeah, till I just fired him. Today, just now before he started shooting. He's chasing people out in the parking lot.
He's in the parking lot chasing people.
With his gun, shooting at him. He's got a. He's carrying a red lunch bag. He's right out in front of my office right now. I see him walking around.
Active shooting. A red bag?
He's got a black shorts and a blue shirt. He's still walking around out in the parking lot.
After the shooters, 131 Chapel Road, we have a black male shooter. A lot of victims down. All right, where is he now?
He may be coming back into the building.
Whereabouts?
The side door.
Side doors. If I face the building, what side?
Right by the flagpoles. The code to get in.
Right side of the flagpole?
Yeah, to the left of the flagpole. The code to get in is 0.
Wearing a red bag, blue shirt, blue shorts.
If the police, ma'am,
Aaron,
Aaron, get in here.
get in.
Get in here.
Hartford
Close the
Distributor,
door.
Budweiser, Beer Distributor.
If they need the code to get in the side door,
All right. All right. Okay, sir. Stay where you are, all right?
okay.
Thank you.
So I'm not a dispatcher, but Robin and Joe are, and I'm guessing that this is a huge adrenaline dump when something like this happens. And in addition to that, you have to start multitasking. You have to start doing 5 or 6 things at once. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Joe, you've been through similar situations, trying to handle the phone, the radio, and of course, at this particular point, Robin, you were only 2 people in dispatch at this particular point, right?
Correct, yes.
So,
Yeah.
the normal situation, I guess, is in Manchester is one handles the call taking, the other handles the actual dispatching. But I'm guessing it's a free for all at this point.
Yes, it was. I mean, my partner was on the phone in the building telling everybody in the building what was going on so they could leave and go, and on the radio, of course. So I was on the phones and I was calling for mutual aid on the hotline, calling for other PDs to get the SWAT team to come while talking to the people on the phone still.
Right. And Joe, I'm sure you know that when something like this happens, you're not just getting one 911 call. The whole board's lighting up and the phone starts ringing off the hook, right?
Right. This is way worse than your typical, say, motor vehicle accident where the phones blow up with 4 or 5 calls reporting the same accident. This is going to be on a 10th exponent scale to it. And to listen to the way Robin handled that, Robin, you were tremendous in handling it and how calm you were. And all of us that have been in that chair know that the multitasking you were doing at that point was off the charts. You could hear you gathering the information from the caller and then giving it out to units over the air and also communicating to people within your comm center as to what's going on. So it was a great job the way you handled that, and to again take that as your first call as you're having your first sips of coffee.
Yeah.
Just hats off to you. That was a well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounded to me like the caller was delivering information rapid fire, and you had to actually slow him down in order to capture everything he was saying.
Yeah, he was a little rattled.
Yeah. So
It's similar.
He was shot in the head, so you got to give him a break.
yeah, right. There aren't too many people who call you up and say, "Hey, I just got shot in the head."
I know. You're like, what?
So let's hear the first radio broadcast.
All available units, 131 Chapel Road. 131 Chapel Road, an active shooting. That's 131 Chapel Road, an active shooting. One party shot in the head. We're getting further.
So that was the first radio call. As Robin mentioned, there was some regional broadcasts that took place, and also some calls coming in from outside. But before we get into that, Joe, you want to discuss with Robin some of the other points?
Yeah. So at this point, Robin, I think we had already ascertained that you had another dispatcher working with you, right? So it was 2 of you in the center.
Yeah, just 2 of us. Yep.
So you've got this call that came in. You're now just getting geared up to get the units going. What kind of feelings were going through you at that time, if you can remember them?
It was chaos. I mean, we were lucky enough that we had 2 officers were like 2 miles away. So they got there first and they went right in. So you're thinking, oh, great. Now they're going to get shot. So you're worried about that. And you're talking to people on the phone. You're trying to get them to shelter in place. Then I had the relatives calling, asking me who was shot. Was their husband dead? And, I don't know who shot. And so I got to talk to them and, try and be,
It's almost like dealing with hysterical callers. These people are emotionally involved with this. So they're going to be, yelling at us, but not in an angry way. They just want information, their loved ones, and they're asking a lot of times for information we don't have the answers to yet, but we don't want to be ignorant of their feelings, but there's a lot of other things we got to take care of right now. Right. So it's kind of hard to push them aside and move on. Chief, why don't you go ahead and play those next two clips, and then we'll go on.
Okay, so the first one you're going to hear is the first regional broadcast. We call it the hotline, but basically what it is a talk around to all of the police departments in the region.
Manchester PD, surrounding town, state police on the hotline. Active shooting. Hartford Distributors, 131 Chapel Road. We have a black male shooter. A lot of victims down.
So Robin is literally doing that with the guy on the phone. 911 is lighting up. They're trying to get resources there. A call has already gone out to people inside the building. Now, because this happened at 7:15, we still had some day shift people coming on, and we had some night shift people who hadn't gone home yet. So they're flushing everybody out of the PD, heading to the scene. And now, after Robin's first regional broadcast, every other town around us is doing the same thing. While this is happening, Robin gets this call.
911, Manchester. This woman is at that distributor in a closet. Ma'am?
Yes.
Where are you, ma'am?
I'm here, right here.
Manchester. She said he's headed towards the warehouse. His name is Omar Thornton. Right, we have that. Okay, go ahead. He's headed towards the warehouse inside the building, ma'am?
Yes.
Are you hiding?
Yes,
I need you to stay down where you are. Hold on 1 second.
So you can actually hear the woman crying in the background, and she's just one of several people who called from inside the building. And you know, I got to tell you, the press was monitoring the scanner, and they arrived on the scene nearly the same time the first responding officers did.
Jeez.
And you can understand the frustrations in the callers and even their feelings. And as a dispatcher, anyone that takes this type of call, regardless of the size of your agency, it's going to overwhelm your immediate resources. But if you're in those situations where you're working with two dispatchers or with one dispatcher, you know, we've got, you know, two phones in our ears. And I know I'm going old school with the headsets. Everyone has wireless ones now. And you're talking on the radios. You have that caller in that closet crying. You don't want to hang up on them, but there's so many other phones lighting up. It's very challenging, and again, very stressful as a dispatcher, because you don't want to let that person go. You're going to be able to obtain some valuable intel from the audio and the backgrounds, but we need to do other things. So it is, again, I just keep going back to the stress that we are under trying to manage this, and it's almost going into automatic mode. We want that muscle memory to take over. But like the chief said in our other webinar on active shooters, we don't experience these enough to develop muscle memory. A lot of this is going to be just immediate reaction to filtering these calls one at a time. So Robin, when you're dealing with this, I'm sure other calls are coming in. How did you cope with those additional calls that were coming in that weren't related to the incident?
We were telling people, I mean, if it wasn't an emergency, they'd have to call back later. We were putting things like certain calls that the supervisor just said, we're not taking them. Just tell them they have to call back later. And that's what we did.
And once things were deemed safe at the scene and they're processing the scene and emotions in dispatch were coming down, how did you get through the rest of the day? How do you take that next call of, you know, is school open tomorrow? I've been sick for 3 days. I need an ambulance. Did you stay the rest of the shift? Did you take some time to get your head together? What happened afterwards?
I stayed, but like I said, we had called in other people. We had a lot of people that came in, and some of them we had other police officers from other towns come in to take calls because our guys were tied up. So we put a dispatcher in the car with those officers to show them how to get to the calls. And some of them took over for us that had worked the calls. So I was in the background for the rest of the day. So, I talked with my fellow workers, and, it was okay.
So you stayed the rest of your shift. You didn't go home after that call.
Nope. Did not go home.
Wow. That says a lot about you and your fortitude to go through this. Now, Chief, I know you have a lot of experience managing PSAPs and communication centers. And how at that time did you support the dispatchers as far as dealing with this critical incident and the PTSD that may follow?
Well, I had plenty of experience with managing dispatch, but no experience in handling this type of stress. This was a seminal event in Manchester Police Department's history, and we had never experienced it before. So I had no idea what to do for my people. In other words, I knew enough not to just concentrate on the police officers, but that the dispatchers were going to be experiencing incredible stress as well. And I had learned that, PTSD is a cumulative process. So it builds and builds and builds. And unless there's a relief provided, you risk losing employees or having people with severe PTSD and things like that. So, at this point in the event, the shooter saw the police arrive. He barricaded himself in a corner office. And as soon as the police officers tried to breach the door, he killed himself. So the shooter is down. We assigned officers to go through the building. We actually searched the building 3 times, because the first time you're searching for other shooters or booby traps or bombs or whatever. The second time you're searching for people who are injured or unable to respond. And then the third time we searched the building, we had to search for people who were hiding. We had people hiding in closets. We had people hiding above ceiling tiles. We had people who were hiding in cars, hiding underneath cars out in the parking lot. And we even had people who climbed the chain link fence and scaled the barbed wire in order to get out. So under this kind of stress, we know what the public will do. But what about the cops and the firefighters and the dispatchers? So I reached out to our peer support, psychological support team. We have a contract with an agency that does that for a living. And I called them up and said, we've had this incident. We need you here. What are we going to do? And to my shock and horror, they said, we have no idea. They had never been through an active shooter either. So at that point, I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. I want you here now. I want you to bring as many people as you can with you. I don't want anybody leaving until they've had a session or a conversation with your people. And then I want to set up a session with every single individual who is on duty today, so that they can have an outlet to talk to somebody. And if they want more sessions, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. But everybody's going to go to at least one session. And we tried to hit as many people as we possibly could before they left that day. So that's how we handled it. But there's no roadmap for this. I don't know of anyone who has enough experience dealing with this kind of thing who has this procedure down. And so what ended up happening is when Sandy Hook happened a couple of years later, they used the same procedure we used, because we had a little bit of experience with this and we knew what to do, and we kind of created it on the fly, however.
I think you bring up some really great points there, Chief. And you made it mandatory that everybody on duty went to a session. And that's something that not every agency has a luxury of doing. As dispatchers, we're sometimes forgotten about. And because we were not on the scene, we may not be involved in those debriefings. And it's really important that we are. And also making it mandatory, I think, is key, because when it's only voluntary, what you see sometimes is people looking around to get an idea on who's going to go to this. And your rookies are looking at your veterans, seeing if they went, and if they're not going to go, maybe I shouldn't go. And it could set them up for failure down the line because they're not going to learn how to process these types of calls.
Right.
But how about, you brought up a good point the other day when we were talking, how did you involve or help out those people that were not on duty? Maybe they left for the day, they had no idea what happened, they come back, and now I'm going to guess your department was a little different than within 24 hours.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I hadn't anticipated. So basically what happened is, if you were a department dispatcher or a department police officer and you happened to be off duty or sleeping or on vacation or whatever, when you came back the next day or the next week, the department had changed and you weren't part of the change. And so what I ended up talking to several employees who were not there, who feel like they missed out on a change in the department that they weren't there to take part in. I never expected that to happen, but in speaking to the fire department, they experienced the same thing. There were those who were there at this call, and there were those who weren't. Or there were those who were in dispatch for this call, and there were those who were in Florida. You know, they were on vacation or whatever. And the department changed dramatically overnight, and other people had to cope with that change.
Well, again, hats off to the way you handled that for your dispatchers. And Robin, did you feel that you and the other dispatcher, those staff, dispatchers, were included and supported by the chief and the administration in getting you through this?
Yes, but typically what everybody thinks is, this is just a bunch of crap, and they don't want to go. They think nothing's going to happen. And that's the typical response from even probably the police officers as well. They just think it's, but it's a good thing to go to if you can get past that you think it's crap. It really is. And that's the mindset.
Once you went through it, did you find it helped you cope with it? Yes. And move on to the next days, weeks, months afterwards?
Yes. Because it gives you something else to think about, Right. Some tools. Yeah.
And I think it was also helpful that when everybody got together as a group to debrief, I think that was cathartic as well. I know we put 50, 75 people in a room and said, okay, from your perspective, what happened? From your perspective, what happened? And it's amazing that different people had different perspectives. A dispatcher, believe it or not, they didn't know some of the details of what had taken place. They didn't know that, maybe that the shooter shot himself. They didn't know all the details. And so what we did is, it was just us in the room, and we kind of put it all out there so everybody understood what everybody else was doing at that time. Some people were in the victim reunification centers. Other people were interviewing witnesses and so on and so forth. But having everybody explain their perspective, I thought was helpful.
Great. All really, really good information. And it kind of leads us into our next couple topics here on the different types of stresses that we all come under in the comm center. The anticipatory stress, that's when we first walk in through the doors. When we sit in that chair, we already anticipate we're going to be dealing with some priority calls. We've got that stress of what's that next call going to bring? What's that next call going to bring? And it brings us down to that last one there, that situational stress. That's when we are in the middle of that call. So as dispatchers, it's just very unique in that we are under stress and taking every single call. I work the streets as a firefighter, as a paramedic, and when you're in your downtime, waiting for that next call, the stress is kind of off you a little bit. But when I became a dispatcher sitting in that chair, the stress doesn't go away. It starts when you walk in the door, and it doesn't end till sometimes well after you leave the building. So when we talk about specifics of critical incident stress, critical incident stress follows those extraordinary events. And on that next slide about critical incident stress, we talk about how important it is to understand how it's normal to feel and act differently for a period of time after these events. You know, we go through extensive training and we go through years of experience and develop these muscle memories to get through these events. But we're human, and these things will affect us. And there are some ways that they're going to manifest itself physically. You'll see loss of appetites and insomnia, headaches, emotionally, those mood swings, behaviorally, there's increased consumptions of alcohols, and cognitively, you get those nightmares and flashbacks. I personally have hit something in all four of those categories. And if you're in this job long enough and you don't have the tools to process the calls, you are going to see these things. But what's important for every dispatcher or every PSAP director here that's watching this webinar, key in on these indicators right here, because even if you don't pick it up in yourself, it's important that you understand what they are so you recognize it in your coworkers. We are one big family in the communication and public safety. So we need to look out for one another. So if you know one of your coworkers dealt with a really tough call and you start to see these changes because you know them best, make sure you address it with them and address it with your administration. Going on to the immediate side effects you're going to see of stress. As soon as that call is done with, on that next slide, Chief, you're going to see behavioral, immediately, again, those overconsumptions, the anxiety, the distractions, you can't concentrate. And physiologically, this could put a toll on your cardiovascular system with blood pressure and heart rate. Robin, after that event, did you notice any of these happening with you or any of the other dispatchers in your center?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't get away from that.
Right. And after you went through I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
I was going to say, Robin, you had talked about your partner at this call chose not to continue in the career.
Yes. Yes, it did a lot more to him than me, I guess, or I handled it better or whatever. But he was young. He was a lot younger, and it happens, I guess.
Yeah. He made the decision that he could not absorb anymore, and chose a different career path.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing for some people. I mean, as we look at that next slide about the principles of trauma-related stress, that first one there, trauma is in the eye of the beholder, and what affects you may not affect others. And a lot of that's going to come with personal experience. Some of the veterans that have maybe dealt with calls like this or dealt with critical incidents before may handle it differently than those rookies or the people that, this is their first exposure to something like this. And as dispatchers, it's important for our administrators to understand that it does affect us. That second one there, I preach this all the time. I taught a stress identification management class for PowerPoint for a number of years. And this is, I always go back to this one here. You have to understand that a traumatic response is a normal response to an abnormal event. We are humans, all right? We're trained to handle things a little differently and be professional and get through this to help others, but we are still humans. So when you feel a little different and things are affecting you, like we saw in those previous slides, don't feel you're a failure. Don't feel you can't hack it. You can't do this job. This is a normal response to that event. We see and hear things that most of the general public does not see and hear. And there are tools to help us get through that. It's a physiobiological event. And like that last one says there, it's really, really important. If you ignore this, what you resist is going to persist. And it's just going to build and build and build and come back and bite you in the end. So let's talk about things that do not help us. Well, these are the immediate go-tos that I know I did, and most people do. Is you start looking at ways to drown out the pain, and alcohol and medications aren't going to make it go away. They may numb the effects now, but it could create a lot more problems down the road. Keeping it to yourself is not a good idea either. But as dispatchers or anyone in public safety, whether you're police, fire, or paramedics or EMS, we have to build up those emotional walls because of those horrific things that we see and hear and smell. And we want to protect our loved ones. We want to protect our families. So it's not like a normal job where you can go back and talk to your wife, your spouse, your kids about a tough day you had. We don't want them having those images and those nightmares that we have. So you need to have that support group and other people to talk about. Pretending it didn't happen, ignoring it is not going to make it go away. And a lot of times our ego gets in the way. I know dealing with this as a firefighter, you think that you're these big, tough firefighter or police officer, nothing's going to bother you, and I can get through this, and it's just another call. And you're really setting yourself up for disaster if you have that mentality. You have to understand that these things do affect you, and they will affect you. And we need to learn the tools to process them and move on to have very long, fruitful careers. So what does help? Well, luckily nowadays we have more stress put on importance put on the critical incident stress debriefing teams and peer support groups. I know where I am in the state of Massachusetts, they have professional teams, peer critical incident stress teams that will go out to agencies and have discussions and conversations with debriefing with anyone involved. And Chief Montminy, you're a prime example here. Management support is critical. We have to have the support of our administrators to include the dispatchers in these discussions. They cannot be left out and thought of as, well, they weren't there, they shouldn't be affected by it, because we're more emotionally attached sometimes than people on that scene. Sharing your experience, I found that by teaching the class that I taught for a number of years was very, very therapeutic to me. Being able to talk about these things over and over again and having other dispatchers share their stories really did help me, give me the tools to process these calls. And ultimately, this is a prime first step to go beyond the peer support groups if we have to involve some other professional mental health people. This is the gateway to get into that. So when we talk about different stress reductions, we have to identify it. And in this case, what we're talking about today, it's that critical call we just dealt with. So talking about it with your coworkers, with your peers, taking time out and setting limits. Now, Robin, you and I talked about this yesterday. As dispatchers, that's pretty hard for us to do. We always feel that need to be at the department working. If I don't go in, someone else is going to get called in on overtime or get held over. So we go beyond what our physical limits are sometimes. Robin, have you been in those situations before?
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's important for us to realize we have to take care of ourselves too, and we have to set those limits. And it's okay to say no. The department's still going to run if we're not there. Everyone's still going to do their job if we're not there. We have to set those no limits. And I know, and everyone I'm sure in this webinar is going to remember those times where, I really have to go in. Sometimes you don't. Make sure you're taking care of yourself first. So treating of PTSD, there are several ways to treat it. But in general, you need to treat it. You need to be able to get through these emotions. The treatment of PTSD doesn't make you forget the event, but it gives you the tools to process those intense emotions. So you can recall them, you can talk about them without going back to that crippling emotion and fear and all those things. So Robin, after you went through a period of the debriefings and treating the PTSD, how are you today talking about that incident that happened several years ago?
I'm okay. I mean, do I think about it every August? Yes, I do. I think what really helped me was meeting a few of the people that were there that day. And, you know, I was going to shake one of their hands and the guy says, "Oh no." And he just grabbed me and hugged me and it was wonderful. So, I mean, that helped me a lot. And I do think about them every year.
Good.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you coming with us, joining us today and sharing those experiences, because I know the first couple of times I shared them, it's tough. It's really, really hard. And I hope this helps you kind of, you know, get through it a little bit better and be able to cope with it a little bit better going forward as well.
Thank you.
Joe, can I chime in on one comment here?
Please, yes.
So the community erected a memorial at the facility for the people who had died. And every August 3rd, they do a memorial service. And the first year they did the service, many of the police officers and dispatchers went to the service and were hugged by family members of those who died.
And that is really important, because I'm sure that gives everyone a sense of closure. You know, one of the things that we don't always get as dispatchers is that closure. You know, the phone hangs up, the call gets dropped, and we never know what happens afterwards. And that is another source of stress that we have to deal with going forward. So I'm really glad they had that opportunity, Chief. Okay, well, at this point, I'm going to kick it back to Danielle. I think she has a couple of questions she wanted to put out to the viewers.
I sure do. Our first question is, does your agency have a critical incident stress debriefing after critical or traumatic calls? Let me just publish that really quickly and give you guys a minute to indicate if you do or do not. I know that actually that was at one of the questions that came through in our questions tab as well. And then after that poll, if you have a second, if you do hold a CISD, is it mandatory or voluntary? And feel free, let's give them a couple of minute or a few seconds to fill that in. And we're getting a couple of votes. And I'll give you guys the verdict.
If you want, Danielle, I can kind of talk about a little bit more about how PowerPhone can help out while we're getting some of these poll questions answered.
Absolutely.
So everything we've talked about today is about dealing with that critical call and then moving on from it. And like we mentioned, these are those high intensity, low frequency type calls that hopefully none of us have enough experience to develop muscle memory with. So how do we get through that? How do we help reduce some of that stress? There's a lot of different ways. I just want to point out a couple ways that I found useful. I used PowerPhone as a dispatcher for a decade before even becoming involved with PowerPhone. And I want you to know that there are tools that we have that can help you if you're looking for some additional resources and tools. Having that structured call handling to assist you with that decision support system is key. As veterans, you may develop a better sense of muscle memory and how to pick the questions to ask. As rookies, you may not have had that exposure. So this is an example of our active shooter procedure, which can be activated through the total response system, which gives that dispatcher those critical questions to ask in that immediateness of those active shootings. Everything that PowerPhone has is 100% customizable. So if you see this procedure up there and think, well, my agency doesn't follow that, this can be changed to meet your agency's SOPs. So having those tools in front of you is definitely going to help. The other thing that can really help is education. We are always, as dispatchers, looking to improve ourselves and to get more education. With PowerPhone site license training, you have access to our entire course catalog. I'm just focusing in on the class that I taught for a very long time, which relates to today, the stress identification and management. A lot of the classes that we take as dispatchers is to learn how to help other people. This class here is designed how to help yourself. So if you are looking for some additional tools in your toolbox to help you get through these calls, we can certainly help out.
I'm going to pop in here for a second and show my face. So we did get a couple of votes and a lot of chat in the chat box, and I thought it would actually be really interesting to read that out. So just the results right now, 65%, we had 26 votes about if agencies had that CISD. 65% of people who voted said yes, that's out of 26, so only a quarter of how many people are here, with 35% saying no. And then about 20 votes came in whether your debriefing is mandatory or voluntary. So the majority of the people who voted, 74%, said it's all voluntary, and then a small percentage, about a quarter of that, said it was voluntary, mandatory. So what I thought was really interesting is just seeing a bunch of the chats, and feel free to go through it. There are agencies that they do not have mandatory debriefings, but they're highly encouraged. And it's mandatory in some agencies. There's a peer support team for critical incidents. That's voluntary. And then one agency said that in April we had a mass shooting. As a dispatch supervisor, we reached out to another agency for peer support. So there are peer support groups, mandatory to attend, but not required to talk. Very, very interesting to see the differences by agency.
It's nice to see that agencies have the support systems. I really feel it's important that it be mandated that everyone goes like Chief Montminy did, because again, if you make it voluntary, people that may need that help do not reach out for that help because they're looking at others that decide they're not going to go, and they don't want to seem weak because they think of it as a sign of weakness, and it's not a sign of weakness. This is important for our health to be strong and have the tools to process these calls and go on. Chief, what are your thoughts on those calls?
Yeah, so there's a difference between peer support and professional support, first off. So I think of peer support as being people within your organization who have volunteered to be a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, which is excellent and very necessary. But Manchester had the luxury of having a hired support organization on call. So we had a voluntary debriefing. No one was made to go to the debriefing. What we made them go to was one session with the contracted health provider and offered them additional if they wanted it. Now, both the police officer and the dispatcher union objected to it, but they both did it. So my sense was that what Robin said, everybody said, "Oh, I don't need it. I don't want to go, but I'm going to go because the management's telling me I gotta." And so that was the reason that they went. And if they didn't want to speak, they didn't have to. And if they wanted to speak more, they could. But the critical incident stress debriefing, or what we called after action debriefing, was not mandatory.
So just to note, you sort of touched on two of the questions that we had in our question box. There is one more that I'd like to read out to everybody. In light of the mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine last night, what's the number one best piece of advice you'd give to those telecommunicators in their communication center to help them in the aftermath?
Well, I got to tell you, I wouldn't give them advice about their jobs. They know what they're doing much better than I do. What the advice I would give would be to their management. And what I would tell Lewiston is when it comes time to start taking care of your people, don't just take care of the cops. And I got to tell you, I made the same mistake in Manchester. So after our incident, we tried our best to take care of the police officers and the dispatchers, but you know who we forgot was our chaplain corps. So we had 4 chaplains who responded to the scene to help with people who were grieving due to lost family members. And I didn't think of them. So when we did the debriefings, when we did the clinician work, I didn't remember that the clinicians had responded there as well. And, they were all priests. And for some reason, it didn't dawn on me that priests might need help too. So my suggestion would be to be as inclusive as possible with anybody who responded to that, including volunteers.
And what I would add, Chief, those are great points. What I would add for the dispatchers is to keep an eye on one another and understand some of the things we talked about here today. And if you start to feel different after taking that call or after working that day, don't feel there's something wrong with you. That's normal. You just need to now talk about it and work with either those peer support groups or the professional agencies that you have through your company, your agency, to get the help you need, because it's normal and you'll get through it. Rob, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, but you said it. I mean, you will get through it. I mean, it may take a little bit, and you should talk to your peers. Even if they weren't there, they may have something to add.
So with that, I'd like to open it up for anyone else to have any last minute questions. While we wait for that, I'll just talk about our next steps. This webinar replay will be emailed to everybody who registered. So even if you have colleagues who are unable to make the live event, they will get a copy of the recording. Obviously, always check your junk and clutter folders. We are on a Livestorm platform. We also have a multitude of resources, a ton of blogs and info and insight from folks within the industry and here internally. And we will be following up with an email. There is a very helpful critical link on Nina that talks about how to deal with mental health, stress, aftermath of critical incidences as well. So if you guys have any questions, of course, we are here. You can go to our website. And let's just see. I'm not sure if any other questions came in, but with that, I will say thank you to everybody. Thank you so much, Chief Mark Montminy. Thank you so much, Robin Turner, for joining us and giving us your perspective and your experience. Everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.